My name is Layla, and my father Daniel, a network administrator, had always ensured that I attended a private school due to his stable financial standing. However, recently, he and my stepmother, Sophia, informed me that they could no longer afford the high tuition fees and suggested I transfer to a public school. This was distressing as all my close friends were at my current school. Despite my attempts to discuss other options, they remained firm, leaving me with the ultimatum to either switch schools or somehow manage the tuition on my own, an impossible task for a 17-year-old. Amidst my panic and with no one else to turn to, I felt utterly trapped. My father had explicitly warned me against asking other family members for financial help, stating it would humiliate him and he'd never speak to me again. I resigned myself to the likelihood of having to leave my school, a thought that deeply upset me. However, a revelation soon changed everything. I discovered that my grandparents had been financially supporting me by sending my father monthly checks intended for my tuition. Shockingly, he had been diverting these funds to lavish gifts for my step-siblings. This misuse of funds was especially disheartening given my mother's passing when I was just 7, and the fact that Sophia's children from a previous marriage barely maintained a relationship with her despite her efforts, and remarrying my dad. I stumbled upon this truth by accident when I noticed that Sophia's kids, who visited over the weekend, arrived with lightly packed bags which were suspiciously overstuffed by the time they left. Driven by curiosity, I peeked into their bags while they slept and found an array of luxury items, bags and shoes, that certainly hadn't come from external visitors as none had been over. The stark contrast between their lavish lifestyle and the alleged financial troubles my father claimed was baffling. This discovery, although accidental, was eye-opening and has left me grappling with the complexity of my family dynamics and my father's betrayal. I recently had a revealing conversation with Sophia's children about the expensive items they always seem to possess. Initially reluctant, the eldest sibling eventually shared that my father and Sophia had been lavishing them with costly gifts for years. The purpose, he suspected, was to coax them into seeing my father as a parental figure. While they welcomed the presents, they made it clear that they had no intention of regarding him as a father, since they already had one, and were not interested in creating a happy family scenario with someone else. This disclosure bothered me, not because of the family dynamics, but because it uncovered a lie from my father. Observing the lifestyle of Sophia's children, who sported luxury brands and seemed flush with cash, I had mistakenly thought their biological father was funding this. However, it turned out that the financial source was likely my father, fueled by money from my maternal grandparents, who had been financially supporting him since my mother's death. Angered and betrayed, I visited my grandparents and shared everything. That's when I learned that they had not only been financially aiding my father, but that this was based on a formal agreement he himself had proposed when I was younger. The agreement was for them to support me through college, which they did, but my father hadn't upheld his responsibilities. In response to the breach, my grandparents sent a legal notice to my father and Sophia for misappropriating funds. This led to a significant argument. My father became defensive, and now they're in a panic, bombarding me with messages to convince my grandparents to withdraw the lawsuit. Despite their pleas and my father's plans to start a business, I'm hesitant to intervene. The situation seems overwhelmingly unfair, and I've chosen to stay with my grandparents indefinitely amidst this turmoil. In light of all this, I've turned to this platform for support and guidance during an emotionally tough time, and I appreciate all the kind words and advice from everyone here. I'm currently in a tough spot because my family dynamics have hit a low, and it feels like I'm in the center of it all. I know I'm doing the right thing, even though it's challenging. A few days ago, my paternal grandparents accused me of being ungrateful and selfish, then proceeded to block me on all platforms. It seems like my dad's side of the family shares this view, not realizing the actual situation. The funds my grandparents were sending, which were intended to support me, were being redirected by my dad to curry favor with his stepchildren. I doubt my dad's family is fully aware of these details. They might just be targeting me to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. Recently, I've had in-depth conversations with my grandparents about how guilty I feel about the whole ordeal. They believe none of this would have happened if my dad had been transparent from the start. He put me in a tough spot by asking me to handle my high school tuition on my own, fully aware that I couldn't afford it, thus forcing me to switch to public school. He was ready to compromise my education for his stepkids, who may never fully accept him regardless of his efforts. My dad wasn't remorseful for manipulating me, lying, or misusing the funds meant for me. So, I've come to realize I shouldn't feel bad about defending my rights. Currently, my grandparents are handling the legal aspects, which allows me to take a step back and focus on staying calm. In discussing legal matters, I've learned a lot. After my mom passed, my dad struggled with his job and was fired due to his depression. At that time, he was in his mid-27s and financially unstable, which is when my grandparents stepped in temporarily until he could stabilize. However, my dad later requested continued financial support, promising it would solely benefit me and any leftovers would go into a savings account for my future use, claiming it's what my mother would have wanted. Trusting his word, my grandparents agreed and even had a contract drafted by lawyers to ensure everything was formalized. Originally, my grandparents believed it was excessive to draft a formal contract with my father, but now they're grateful they did. This agreement now allows them to legally address the fact that my father has not adhered to their financial arrangements. For years, he had been secretly withdrawing from savings meant for me, something I was completely unaware of until recently. The secrecy was likely intended to shield me from family conflicts, and in hindsight, I appreciate being kept out of it. Understanding this backstory has eased some of the guilt I felt over the family tensions. I've often wondered why my father couldn't simply do his best as a single parent without seeking substantial help from my maternal grandparents. Yet, this support has shaped the lifestyle I've grown accustomed to, and while I may never fully grasp his decisions or his reasons, I've stopped trying to make sense of them. They only add confusion and stress to my life. Currently, I'm focusing on my studies and trying to manage the chaos in my personal life. The less I dwell on these issues, the better I feel. I've been staying with my grandparents for the past 3 weeks, seeking a break from home and my father's relentless attempts to contact me. Initially, he tried to make me feel guilty, hoping I'd persuade my grandparents to dismiss their legal actions. However, his persistent guilt-tripping led me to block him, a tough decision, but necessary for my well-being. Despite missing him, I needed to prioritize my mental health, especially after being labeled selfish and entitled by his side of the family. It's been quiet without contact, but today he reached out again. He called from an unknown number, and upon hearing his voice, my initial reaction was to hang up. But he pleaded for a chance to explain. He admitted his shortcomings and his failure to prioritize my needs, expressing a genuine desire to settle his debts transparently through my grandparents and their lawyer. He was ready to make amends, not just for the financial missteps, but to repair our relationship. He broke down, expressing how much he missed me. It was hard to hear his remorse and see his tears. Despite his sincerity, I told him I needed time and space to sort things out, emphasizing that while I needed distance now, it didn't mean forever. This break was crucial for me to understand my feelings and the future of our relationship, away from the pressures and past mistakes. My emotions surrounding this entire ordeal are quite complex and deeply rooted in a sense of betrayal. It has been devastating, and it's not something I can easily dismiss or forget as if nothing ever happened. Forgiving him and resuming our life together is a challenging prospect. Initially, I expected him to react defensively or to dispute my feelings, but instead, he acknowledged the pain he caused. He expressed genuine remorse, admitting he had lost track of his priorities by focusing too much on responsibilities that weren't his to bear, neglecting our own child, his actual flesh and blood. This neglect was his greatest regret, he shared. Rather than arguing, he affirmed my decision to maintain distance, understanding and respecting my need for space. This acknowledgement from him was bittersweet. Before ending our conversation, I urged him to resolve things with my grandparents by returning the money he owed, aiming for a transparent settlement process overseen by a lawyer, which he agreed was necessary. He admitted his mistakes and preferred to avoid further legal expenses by settling, which was a relief to hear. Yet, I've chosen to keep this under wraps until he takes definitive action. In a surprising turn, I unblocked my father after our talk. Despite the turmoil, I miss him dearly. He is my only remaining parent, and before these recent issues, he was an exceptional dad. Even amidst these financial troubles, he's been emotionally supportive. It's confusing. Part of me feels I shouldn't forgive him so readily based on others' expectations, yet I can't help but yearn for his presence in my life. The aftermath of our conversation has left me more conflicted than before. Since sharing my story, many have voiced their opinions on whether I should forgive him. To everyone who has commented, your perspectives are invaluable as I navigate these complicated feelings toward my father. I deeply appreciate the guidance that everyone offers me. However, I feel this is a journey I must navigate by myself. At just 17, I realized that any choices I make now might not necessarily hold for a lifetime. That's part of growing up. I have a lot of life ahead of me. Currently, I'm coping without my father's presence, but I'm not sure I'll be okay with this permanently. Growing up, my father played both parental roles excellently. As a single parent, he never let me feel neglected. Our relationship only began to change after his recent marriage, although he still tried his best to support me. This complexity makes me cautious about my decisions. If he had never been a good father, I wouldn't have struggled so much with my feelings. Despite his significant mistakes, I know he regrets them, especially since, shortly after our last conversation, he withdrew from a legal dispute he was involved in with my grandparents, choosing to settle and be transparent instead. This showed me he was sincere about making amends. They assured me of their support regardless of my decision, although they admit they can no longer trust or respect him as before. This doesn't mean they'd oppose my choice if I decide to let him back into my life. I haven't decided yet if I'll forgive him, but it comforts me to know my grandparents will respect my choice. I recognize that things will never be the same between my father and me due to recent revelations. The rift with his side of the family has deepened, and I doubt I'll reconcile with my paternal grandparents soon. My relationship with my dad remains complex, but it's a different, more personal matter. All these thoughts weigh on me, but they are mine to untangle as I grow and learn from each experience. I'm currently facing an incredibly challenging and confusing situation with my dad, and I honestly don't know how to handle it. It's a scenario I've never encountered before, particularly with a family member. The complexity and oddity of it all leave me uncertain about whether forgiving him would even be the right decision. The emotional turmoil makes me feel lost, unsure of how to proceed with my feelings or what steps to take next. If I choose to forgive him, I'm certain that therapy will be essential to navigate and mend our relationship. Despite his requests for me to return, I can't see that happening anytime soon. Thankfully, I have the support of my wealthy grandparents who have been able to advocate on my behalf. Without them, I can't imagine the difficulties I would be facing. Knowing that my dad would have put me through such hardships changes my perspective entirely and complicates my feelings towards him. At this moment, he seems to be trying to make amends, but my thoughts are swirling, alternating between defending and blaming him. It's been a confusing few days, and I'm just trying to express my feelings as clearly as I can. However, I think it's time for me to take a break from discussing this. I won't be updating for a few weeks as I need some time to make a clear decision about my future interactions with him. Despite my father's efforts and my initial inclination to forgive, deep-seated doubts remain. After much thought, I've realized that maintaining the status quo or pretending everything is all right would be dishonest to myself. The reality is that things will never be the same because of his actions, and I can't ignore that. For now, the best path for me is to stay with my grandparents, who have warmly welcomed me to remain with them indefinitely. They are happy to have me, and it's a relief to know I have their support. While I know my dad would like to have me back, it's not what I need at the moment. Today, I reached out to him to share my decision, explaining that after everything that has happened, staying with my grandparents is the right choice for me. Rebuilding my relationship with my father and his partner, Sophia, would undoubtedly be challenging. If we were to share a home again, I imagine feeling uncomfortable, particularly because Sophia played a significant role in recent tensions and never reached out to apologize. Despite my father suggesting that Sophia felt remorse and considered contacting me, her silence spoke louder, leaving me upset. Historically, Sophia and I maintained a cordial relationship. I respected her as a member of the family, but never as a mother figure. So, an apology, at the very least, seemed a reasonable expectation after everything that transpired. At this point, I've decided not to return to living with my father. With college on the horizon, my departure is imminent anyway. My father seemed disappointed, but respected my decision. He asked that we at least keep in touch and meet occasionally, admitting his mistakes and expressing a desire to amend our strained relationship. After some thought, I agreed to maintain contact, but insisted on integrating therapy into our interactions, believing professional guidance is crucial for healing. We've agreed to meet weekly with a therapist and communicate at least twice a week over the phone, aiming to mend our relationship. My grandparents support this plan, and I'm hopeful that, with time and effort, we might find a way forward. For now, my focus is on preserving my mental health and navigating this complex chapter of my life with as much grace and understanding as possible.